Rohan had served in the Navy for 12 long years. His time in service had made him disciplined, calm, and hardworking. When he finally retired, he wanted peace. He wanted to live by the water, somewhere quiet where he could watch the sunrise every morning and hear the sound of birds instead of sirens. He found a small house near Lake Meadow, a calm blue lake surrounded by green trees and clean air. It felt like the perfect place to start a new chapter of life. Rohan had a special connection with the lake. It reminded him of his old days in the Navy. During service, he had spent many nights patrolling the sea, facing storms and waves, always protecting his country. When he retired, he bought his old Navy patrol boat from a government auction. It was not just a boat for him. It was a piece of his past, a memory of his service, and a sign of pride. He worked hard to restore it. The boat was painted silver and blue, shining like new under the sun. He parked it neatly on his driveway beside his garage. He cleaned it every week and covered it with a strong canvas so it stayed safe from rain and dust. He made sure it did not block the road or disturb anyone. Before parking it, he checked the HOA rulebook carefully. It said that residents must not block streets or store junk vehicles, but there was nothing written about boats. Rohan felt confident that he was following all the rules. For the first few weeks, life was peaceful. The neighbors greeted him kindly. An old man named Tom often stopped to talk. A young couple passing by once said his boat looked amazing and asked about his Navy stories. Everyone seemed friendly except one person. Her name was Karen. Karen was the head of the Homeowners Association, also called the HOA. She lived 2 houses away and acted as if she was the ruler of the neighborhood. She always carried a small notebook and liked writing down what she thought were violations. Many people disliked her but stayed quiet because they did not want problems. She believed every lawn should look the same. Every house should be painted in the same color, and no one should do anything that she did not approve of. One sunny morning, Rohan was polishing the side of his boat when Karen walked up to his driveway. She stood there with her hands on her hips and frowned. "What is that thing doing here?" she asked in a sharp voice. Rohan looked up and smiled politely. "It is my Navy boat. I used it during my service. I keep it clean and parked properly. It is not bothering anyone." Karen's frown grew deeper. "This is not a dock. This is a family neighborhood. We cannot have big metal boats sitting in driveways. It looks terrible." Rohan kept his calm tone. "I read the rule book. It does not say anything against boats." Karen crossed her arms. "You read it wrong. Boats are not allowed here. They lower property value." "Then please show me where that is written," Rohan said. Karen turned away. "You will see soon enough," she said and walked off angrily. Rohan watched her leave, wondering why she cared so much about something that was not hurting anyone. He shook his head and went back to work. A few days later, Rohan received a letter from the HOA. It said he was in violation for storing a large watercraft in public view. The letter demanded that he remove it within 7 days or face daily fines. Rohan sighed. He knew this was Karen's doing. He took photos of his boat, his driveway, and the rulebook. Then he wrote an email to the HOA board, explaining that his boat was not violating any rule. He attached the pictures and asked for a fair review. He decided to handle everything with patience. 3 days later, while Rohan was fixing a small light on the boat, Karen showed up again. This time she had a bright orange tag in her hand. Without asking, she stuck it right on the side of the boat. Rohan turned around quickly. "What are you doing?" Karen replied. "This is an official HOA notice. You have to remove this boat immediately or it will be towed." Rohan felt his chest tighten. "You cannot tag private property." "This is my boat parked on my land." Karen smiled coldly. "The HOA has authority over visible property. It is in the rules." Rohan took the tag off carefully and looked at it. It said HOA Code Enforcement. But he knew the HOA had no such department. It looked like something Karen had printed herself. He said calmly, "You should not do this without checking the law." Karen walked away. "Do what you want. You have 7 days before the towing truck comes." Rohan took a picture of the tag and saved it as proof. He also started writing down every event with dates and times. He knew the Navy had taught him one thing: document everything. A week later, another letter came from the HOA. This one said the boat was a safety hazard. A day after that, a third letter arrived calling it abandoned property. Rohan could not believe how far Karen was going. He called the city property office to ask if the HOA could do this. The city inspector came by to check. After inspecting the boat, the inspector said, "Everything looks fine. It is registered, insured, and parked legally. The HOA cannot tag or tow it without a court order." Rohan thanked him and thought the matter was over. But Karen was not done. The next morning, a tow truck stopped in front of his house. The driver stepped out and said, "Sir, I got a call to remove an abandoned Navy boat." Rohan showed his papers. "It is not abandoned. It is mine and it is parked on private property." The driver nodded after checking. Someone gave false information then. "I am not touching this." Karen was watching from her yard. When the truck left, her face turned red. She stormed back into her house. That evening, she sent a long email to everyone in the neighborhood saying that Rohan was breaking rules and disrespecting the community. Some people ignored her. Some started whispering. Rohan noticed a few neighbors stopped waving at him. It hurt him a little, but he stayed calm. He had dealt with bigger challenges in life. The next week, a white SUV parked in front of his house. Two men stepped out, both wearing suits and badges. Karen peeked through her window, pretending to clean. One of the men said, "Sir, we are from the State Property Commission. We received a complaint about someone tagging a registered Navy vessel." Rohan looked surprised. "Yes, someone put a tag on my boat without permission." The man looked at the boat and took notes. "This boat has a Navy hull number. Tampering with it is not allowed by private citizens. It is treated as defacing government property." Rohan pointed toward Karen's house. "She is the one who did it." The man nodded. "We will investigate this matter. Thank you for your cooperation." Karen turned pale when she saw the agents taking pictures. She quickly went back inside, closing her curtains. Rohan stood quietly near his boat, watching the calm water of Lake Meadow. The sunlight reflected on the silver surface of his patrol boat. He knew this was just the beginning, but he also knew that the truth was now on his side. The battle with the HOA had started, but this time, Karen was the one who was going to face the real consequences. The next morning was quiet at Lake Meadow. The air was cool, and sunlight reflected on the water like glass. Rohan sat on his porch with a cup of tea trying to relax. But he knew things were about to get serious. The visit from the state property officers was no small matter. When they said they would investigate the tagging of a Navy vessel, it meant there would be official action. Karen did not come outside that day. Her curtains stayed closed. Usually she would be walking around, checking lawns and writing notes, but now her house was silent. Some neighbors noticed it too. A few of them whispered that maybe she had gone too far this time. Later that afternoon, Rohan received a call from one of the officers who had visited him. The man introduced himself as Officer Martin. His voice was calm and professional. "Mr. Rohan," he said, "we have confirmed that the boat is a registered Navy vessel sold to you legally after retirement. However, the tag placed on it was not authorized by any government or HOA body. It appears to be an imitation enforcement notice." Rohan replied, "I expected that. I took a photo of the tag before removing it." "Good," Officer Martin said. "That will help. We are forwarding the case to the local legal department because the act counts as tampering with a registered item. We will keep you informed." Rohan thanked him. When he ended the call, he felt a mix of relief and curiosity. He wondered what kind of trouble Karen had invited for herself. A few hours later, two city officials arrived again. This time they asked for Karen. They walked straight to her door and knocked. Rohan watched from a distance as she stepped out, looking nervous. The officials showed their badges and started asking questions. Karen tried to argue, pointing toward Rohan's house several times, but the officials kept their calm tone. After 10 minutes, they left with some papers in their hands. Karen stood at her door looking shocked. That night, Tom, the old man from across the street, came over to talk to Rohan. He was holding a small flashlight. "Looks like the HOA queen is in trouble," Tom said with a grin. Rohan smiled lightly. "I just want peace. I never wanted all this drama." Tom nodded. "I know, son, but she has been bothering everyone for years. Maybe this time she will learn." Rohan appreciated Tom's support. He went to bed feeling more relaxed, believing that the matter would soon end. But the next morning, a new letter arrived in his mailbox. It was from the HOA again. This time, the letter was written by Karen's assistant, but it carried her tone. It said, Despite outside interference, the board stands by its decision that large boats are not permitted. Continued refusal will result in legal action from the HOA. Rohan could not believe what he was reading. She was still pushing her rules even after being warned by officials. He realized that Karen would not stop until someone made her stop. He decided to reply formally. He printed all the pictures, letters, and emails he had collected and placed them neatly in a folder. Then he wrote a detailed response. He explained how he followed every rule, how the city and state had already cleared him, and how Karen's actions had crossed legal limits. He sent copies of everything to the HOA board, the city office, and the state property commission. Days passed. Some neighbors began showing support. A woman named Mira from the next street came by and said, "Karen did the same thing to us when we built a small shed. She said it was illegal even though it wasn't. I hope you teach her a lesson." Rohan thanked her and smiled. He never wanted revenge, only fairness. A week later, the city office sent him another message. They were opening a joint investigation into the HOA's behavior. The message mentioned that the HOA's handling of property violations would be reviewed, especially their use of fake tags and unauthorized enforcement actions. When the news spread around the neighborhood, people started talking openly. Many residents had stories about Karen's harsh behavior. One family said she fined them for painting their mailbox blue. Another said she had entered their backyard without permission to take photos. Slowly, the fear that Karen had built for years began to fade. The following Friday, the HOA held a meeting at the community center. Karen stood at the front with a pile of papers. She looked tense but tried to sound confident. As head of the board, she said loudly, "I have the right to keep our community beautiful. Some residents have chosen to disrespect the rules. Boat sheds and strange colors ruin our image. We must stay united." Rohan attended the meeting quietly, sitting in the back. When she finished her speech, he raised his hand. "With respect," he said calmly, "you are enforcing rules that do not exist in our documents. The city has already said the boat is legal. The state officers also confirmed that tagging it was unlawful. Why are you still sending letters?" Karen's face turned red. "Because you are wrong. You are twisting the rules." Rohan opened his folder. "I have copies of every message, including the one where you threatened to tow my boat. I also have a photo of the fake tag you used." The room fell silent. People looked at Karen with surprise. Some whispered to each other. Karen tried to laugh it off. That tag was just a warning label. It was not fake. At that moment, one of the city officials entered the room. It was Officer Martin. He greeted the group and said, "We have been reviewing this HOA's activity. We have found several rule violations. We also received multiple complaints from residents." Karen froze. Her confident expression disappeared. Officer Martin continued, "Placing unauthorized tags on registered property, threatening residents, and issuing false fines are all serious offenses. A full report has been sent to the legal department. Further financial penalties will follow based on the investigation results." The crowd murmured. Some people clapped quietly. Karen tried to argue, but her voice shook. "This is nonsense," she said. "We were just maintaining order." Officer Martin looked at her directly. "Order does not mean breaking the law." He handed her a document and said, "You will receive a formal notice within a week." Then he turned to Rohan and said, "Thank you for your patience and cooperation, sir." After the meeting, people gathered around Rohan, thanking him for standing up. For the first time, the neighborhood felt united instead of controlled. Karen left early, avoiding everyone. Her car sped out of the parking lot without a word. Later that evening, Rohan sat beside his boat again. The lake was calm and the stars reflected on the surface. He thought about everything that had happened. He had not wanted a fight, but sometimes doing what is right meant standing firm. 2 days later, he received another call from Officer Martin. "Mr. Rohan, we wanted to inform you that the HOA and its head are under official review. It appears that multiple residents were overcharged through false fines. The amount totals hundreds of thousands of dollars." Rohan listened quietly. "That explains why she kept pushing people. She was making money from those fines." "That is correct," the officer said. "We will soon release a public notice." After the call, Rohan looked across the quiet street. Karen's house lights were off. The community that once feared her now felt free. The case was no longer just about a boat. It had turned into a lesson about fairness and accountability. And Rohan knew that justice was getting closer with every passing day. The neighborhood of Lake Meadow had never felt so restless. For years, everyone had lived under the strict rules of the HOA led by Karen. People were afraid to speak up, afraid to receive fines, and afraid to question her orders. But now the truth was starting to come to light. The investigation into the HOA had shaken the whole community. Rohan sat on his porch one morning reading the newspaper. A headline caught his eye. It said, "State launches audit of Lake Meadow HOA." He smiled quietly. The report said that the State Property Commission had found several cases of fake violations and unauthorized fines issued to residents. There were even mentions of missing money from the HOA account. Tom, the friendly old neighbor, walked over holding his coffee mug. "I told you, son," he said with a grin. "When people try to control everyone, it always comes back to them." Rohan nodded. "I did not want this fight, but it was needed. People deserve fair treatment." As they talked, a few other neighbors joined them. Mira came with her little dog and said, "Did you see the news? They are checking all the HOA bank statements. Karen must be losing sleep." Rohan tried not to show too much excitement, but inside he felt proud that his calm and patient approach had worked. He had not shouted or argued. He had just followed the law and let the truth do its job. Across the street, Karen's house looked quiet. The curtains were closed all day. Her car was still parked in the driveway, but she had not been seen since the meeting. The mailbox was overflowing with letters. Some residents whispered that she might have received legal documents from the city. That afternoon, a white van arrived at her house. Two officials stepped out and started taking boxes from the trunk. They went inside with clipboards. People watched from their windows. Everyone knew this was part of the investigation. Later in the evening, the HOA vice president, a woman named Clara, came to Rohan's house. She looked nervous but also relieved. "Mr. Rohan," she said, "I wanted to thank you. I knew Karen was doing things the wrong way, but she never allowed anyone else to question her. Every time I tried to raise a concern, she threatened to remove me from the board. Now the authorities are asking for all records, and it is clear that many fines were fake." Rohan listened carefully. "Did she take the money herself?" Clara nodded slowly. "Yes, she was transferring HOA funds into her personal account. She said it was for maintenance projects, but there was no proof of any such projects. We think she collected over $400,000 in false fines from residents over the last few years." Rohan felt a mix of anger and disbelief. That is a lot of money. She used fear to steal from people. Clara sighed. "Yes. Many residents paid those fines because they thought the HOA had power to punish them. No one dared to check." That night, Rohan could not sleep. He kept thinking about all the families who had suffered because of Karen's greed. He decided he would not stop until everyone in the neighborhood got justice. The next morning, a group of residents gathered near the community park. People were talking, sharing their experiences, and planning to form a new HOA committee. Rohan attended too, not to lead but to support. He wanted the community to find peace again. Mira stood up and said, "We need to report our past payments. Many of us were charged hundreds of dollars for silly things like grass being too long or mailbox paint. We should get that money back." Tom agreed. "We should also make sure no one like Karen ever controls everything again. The HOA should be fair, not scary." Everyone nodded. Clara, who had now resigned from her post, promised to help the investigators by sharing all documents she had. While the community worked to rebuild trust, the investigation reached its final stage. Officers from the State Property Commission visited Rohan again. Officer Martin, who had handled the case from the start, looked satisfied. "Mr. Rohan," he said, "we have completed our review. The evidence is strong. The HOA violated several property laws, and the head of the board will face financial penalties and possible legal charges." Rohan asked, "How much will she have to pay?" Officer Martin looked at his notes. "The total fine is estimated at $450,000. This includes all the money she collected unlawfully and additional penalties." Rohan was silent for a moment. He felt that justice had been served. Officer Martin added, "You should know. Your case was the key reason we opened the investigation. Without your patience and evidence, this might have gone unnoticed. Rohan thanked him. I only did what was right. I did not want revenge, just fairness. That afternoon, word spread through the entire neighborhood. People came out of their houses smiling, relieved that the long nightmare was ending. Children played in the park again. For the first time, the atmosphere felt light. Karen, however, stayed inside her house. Official cars came and went, delivering papers. She had no more power, no more authority, and no one to support her. A few days later, Rohan received a letter from the city thanking him for his cooperation. It said that the HOA would be restructured with new leadership, and that residents would receive refunds for the false fines they had paid. Tom read the letter and laughed. Looks like your boat did more for this neighborhood than the HOA ever did. Rohan smiled. I just wanted to live quietly by the lake, but life had other plans. Mira said, You brought justice here. People will remember that. Rohan looked at his silver and blue patrol boat, shining under the sun. It had once protected the coast, and now it had somehow protected a neighborhood too. A week later, the city held a small community event by the lake. It was meant to celebrate the new start of Lake Meadow. The mayor gave a short speech about honesty and unity. Rohan was invited as a guest of honor. During the event, Officer Martin shook his hand. Mr. Rohan, it is rare to see someone handle such trouble with patience and respect. You showed everyone that calm actions speak louder than anger. Rohan smiled and said, In the Navy, we were taught to stay steady even in storms. I guess that helped here. People clapped, and some residents even asked to take pictures with him near the boat. It became a symbol of truth and courage. After the event, Karen's house was put up for sale. She had no choice but to move away. Her time as the HOA head was over. Rohan went back to his peaceful routine. Every morning he sat by the lake with his tea, watching the sunlight dance on the water. The air felt fresher now. There were no angry letters, no arguments, and no orange tags. Sometimes when Tom walked by, he would joke, Your Navy boat scared off the HOA. Rohan would laugh softly. Maybe it did. Or maybe it reminded people that standing for what is right is the real strength. The neighborhood of Lake Meadow slowly returned to being what it was meant to be. A calm and friendly place. Children played without worry. Families smiled at each other again, and people began to trust their community. For Rohan, peace had finally returned. The boat that once faced ocean storms had faced a different kind of storm on land and won again. Weeks passed peacefully at Lake Meadow after the news about the fine spread. The HOA was no longer feared. People felt free to live without worrying about surprise letters or fake violations. Gardens looked brighter, and children's laughter could be heard again. The dark cloud that had hung over the neighborhood for years was finally gone. Rohan enjoyed the quiet mornings by the lake. Every day he woke up early, made a cup of tea, and sat near his boat. The silver and blue paint still looked fresh, and the reflection on the water always brought back old Navy memories. He was happy that the storm in his life had ended, but deep down he knew there were still a few things left to settle. One afternoon, Rohan received a message from Clara, the former vice president of the HOA. She had been working with the state officers to close the investigation. She wanted to meet him at the community center. When Rohan arrived, Clara greeted him with a warm smile. She looked more relaxed than before. On the table were a few folders and documents. Rohan, she said, I wanted to show you the final report. The investigation is complete. Karen has officially been removed as HOA head, and she cannot hold any property management position again. Rohan nodded. That is fair. She caused too much trouble for honest people. Clara continued. The HOA funds have been audited. The city found that Karen used most of the money for personal expenses. They froze her accounts and will use those funds to refund residents who were wrongly fined. Rohan smiled. That is good news. People deserve to get back what they lost. Clara handed him a paper. This letter is from the mayor's office. They want to thank you for your cooperation and patience. They said your case will be used as an example of how to deal with unfair HOA actions calmly and legally. Rohan read the letter carefully. It praised his discipline and steady attitude. He felt proud, but he stayed humble. "I only did what anyone else would have done if they had known their rights," he said. Later that evening, Rohan went home feeling peaceful. He thought about how everything had started from one simple act, a tag on his boat. What seemed like a small issue had uncovered something much bigger. The next day, as he was cleaning his boat, Tom came walking over with a grin. "I heard the city is giving back money to everyone who paid those fake fines," he said. "Yes," Rohan replied. "Clara told me the refunds will start next week," Tom laughed. "Well, maybe now I can finally fix my old fence. Karen fined me twice for that, even though it was my own property." Rohan chuckled. "Looks like this neighborhood will finally heal." A few moments later, a delivery truck stopped near Rohan's driveway. The driver stepped out and said, "Are you Mr. Rohan? This package is from the city office." Rohan signed the paper and opened the box. Inside was a small framed certificate with his name on it. It said Certificate of Civic Appreciation and carried the city seal. The message below read, "For standing for fairness and showing patience in protecting community rights." Rohan smiled and placed it inside his house on the wall near his Navy medals. For him, it was not about fame or awards. It was about peace and justice. Meanwhile, the city announced that Lake Meadow HOA would be restructured under new management. A fresh election was scheduled for new board members. Residents were allowed to nominate candidates. For the first time, people were excited to attend an HOA meeting. During the nomination day, many neighbors suggested Rohan's name. They wanted him to lead the new board, but Rohan kindly declined. "I am honored," he said during the meeting, "but I believe leadership should come from people who love organizing and helping others. I will always be here to support, but I do not need a title." Mira raised her hand and said, "Even if you are not on the board, we all know you are the heart of this community." Everyone clapped and cheered. The atmosphere was full of warmth and respect. The new HOA board included Clara, Mira, and Tom. They promised to make decisions through open voting and communication. Every rule would be discussed in public meetings and no one would be fined without clear proof. The next few weeks brought a fresh spirit to Lake Meadow. Neighbors began to plant flowers together. Some painted their fences while others started a small park renovation. The community that had once been silent and afraid was now active and united. One evening, Rohan received a knock on his door. When he opened it, Karen stood there. Her eyes looked tired and she carried a small envelope in her hand. "Rohan," she said quietly, "I came to return something." Rohan was surprised but stepped aside. She handed him the envelope. Inside was a letter of apology. She said, "I know it will not change what I did, but I want to say sorry. I let pride control me. I thought I was protecting the neighborhood, but I was only protecting my own ego. The investigation showed me how wrong I was." Rohan looked at her calmly. "It takes courage to admit mistakes. I hope you learn from this and find peace." Karen nodded. "I have sold my house. I'm moving away next week. I just wanted to say goodbye." Rohan wished her well. "Everyone deserves a chance to start again. I hope you use yours wisely." Karen gave a small nod and left. It was a quiet ending to a loud chapter. After she left, Rohan stood for a long moment thinking about how life could change in unexpected ways. The same person who had once caused him so much trouble had now walked away with humility. He felt no anger, only calm acceptance. That weekend, the new HOA organized a community celebration at the park. It was a bright day with music, food, and laughter. People played games, children ran around, and everyone seemed happy. Clara gave a short speech thanking all the residents for staying united. "We have learned that power must come with responsibility," she said. "Rules are meant to protect, not to punish. Our neighborhood will now be built on respect and kindness." When Rohan's name was mentioned, the crowd clapped and cheered loudly. He felt humbled but grateful. He waved lightly and said, "I only did what was right. We all did this together." As the sun began to set, Rohan took a slow walk along the lake. The golden light reflected on the water. His boat stood still in the driveway, shining softly in the fading light. Tom joined him and said, "Feels like the lake is smiling again." Rohan nodded. "Yes, peace has returned. It was a long fight, but it was worth it." They stood there quietly, listening to the sound of the gentle waves. That night, when Rohan went inside, he looked once more at the certificate on his wall. Next to it hung his Navy photo. Both reminded him of the same lesson. that courage does not always mean fighting battles. Sometimes it means standing calmly when others lose their way. For Rohan, the lake, the boat, and the community now carried a new meaning. It was not just a home but a symbol of fairness and hope. Months passed at Lake Meadow and life returned to normal. The air felt lighter, and people smiled more often. The neighborhood that had once been divided now stood united. Every weekend, children rode their bicycles down the clean streets and families gathered by the lake for small picnics. The tension and fear that once haunted the place were now memories fading into the past. Rohan still woke early every morning as he always did. His Navy discipline never left him. He would prepare his tea, step outside, and look at his patrol boat. The boat now had a small sign on its side that read Guardian of Lake Meadow. It was a name the community gave it as a mark of respect. Sometimes neighbors would stop by to greet him. They all admired the way he handled the situation with patience and strength. Many of them said he had saved the whole community from years of unfair treatment. But Rohan never saw himself as a hero. He believed he only did what any fair person would do when faced with injustice. One morning, Clara came by with good news. She was holding a stack of papers. "Rohan," she said, smiling, "the state has sent a new policy guide for all homeowner associations. Your case helped create it. From now on, HOAs across the region must follow new transparency rules." Rohan looked surprised. "You mean this small fight of ours changed the law?" Clara nodded proudly. "Yes, it did. The state used your story as an example of how people should be protected from unfair treatment. Every HOA now has to report its funds and actions openly. Residents will have the right to check any record." Rohan smiled gently. "Then it was worth every moment. I am glad something good came out of it." Tom joined them a few minutes later carrying a box of tools. "I heard we're fixing the park benches today," he said. "Yes," Clara replied. "And we're also setting up the new community notice board." Rohan laughed. "Let's get to work then." The three of them spent the day helping others at the park. Children brought paintbrushes to color the benches, while parents planted new flowers near the walking path. Mira organized snacks and drinks for everyone. The air was filled with laughter and the scent of fresh grass. At one point, an older man named Mr. Shah approached Rohan. "I have lived here for 20 years, he said. "I never thought I would see this neighborhood so alive again. Thank you for reminding us that good people can still make a difference." Rohan shook his hand warmly. "It was all of us, Mr. Shah. Everyone played a part." Later in the afternoon, as they rested under the shade, Clara said, "You know, the new HOA team is doing great, but we still want you to be our advisor. You don't have to attend meetings, just guide us when we face tough choices." Rohan thought for a moment and said, "If my experience can help, I will be happy to share it." From that day onward, Rohan became an unofficial advisor for the new HOA. He never demanded authority or recognition. He simply offered wisdom when asked. His calm words and fair approach helped the new board avoid the same mistakes as before. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. A local news reporter visited Lake Meadow. She had heard about the story from the city office and wanted to make a feature about the neighborhood's transformation. She interviewed Rohan near his boat. "Mr. Rohan," she said, "your story has inspired many. What message would you like to give people facing unfair treatment from their own communities?" Rohan paused before answering. "Never lose patience and never respond with anger. Truth always finds its way when you stand calm and honest. I did not fight anyone. I only stood for what was right." The reporter smiled. "That is powerful advice." When the story aired on television, people from nearby towns started visiting Lake Meadow. They wanted to see the place where a single resident had changed the way HOAs worked. Some even called it the fair community. One weekend, the city mayor himself came to visit. He congratulated the residents and praised their teamwork. "This is what happens when people come together," he said during a small gathering. "You showed the whole city that fairness begins at home." Rohan thanked him politely and said, "It was not about fighting authority. It was about reminding people that rules are meant to serve, not to control." The mayor nodded with respect. Wise words indeed. That evening, as the event ended, fireworks lit up the sky above the lake. The colorful lights reflected on the calm water and everyone cheered. Rohan stood quietly, watching the bright colors dance across the waves. After the crowd went home, he took a slow walk by the water. The moonlight shone gently and the night was peaceful. He thought about how much had changed. When he first moved to Lake Meadow, he only wanted a quiet place to retire. But fate had chosen him to lead a silent battle for fairness, and in doing so, he had found something greater than peace. He had found purpose. A few days later, Rohan received another letter from the city. This time it was an invitation to speak at a community event about residents' rights and responsibility. At first, he hesitated. He was not used to public speaking, but Clara encouraged him to go. "You have a voice people listen to," she said. "Share what you learned." It could help others. Rohan agreed and attended the event. When he walked onto the small stage, the crowd clapped warmly. He spoke in his calm voice. "I never wanted fame," he began. "I only wanted peace. But peace cannot exist without fairness. Every community must remember that respect goes both ways. Those who lead must listen, and those who follow must speak truth when needed. If we keep that balance, harmony will stay." The audience listened closely, and when he finished, they applauded. Many people came to thank him after the speech. That night, when he returned home, Rohan sat by his window and looked at the lake again. The patrol boat stood quietly, shining under the soft light. It had once been a symbol of trouble, but now it stood as a symbol of unity and courage. He whispered softly, "Mission complete." The next morning, the community gathered once again, but this time it was for a happier reason. The new HOA officially opened a small park area and named it Harmony Point. A stone plaque was placed at the entrance with a simple message carved on it, in honor of those who stood for fairness and peace at Lake Meadow. The whole neighborhood clapped as the cloth covering the plaque was removed. Children played around it while the adults shared stories of how things had changed. Tom laughed and said, "Who would have thought the same place that caused so many arguments would one day become our favorite spot?" Mira smiled. "Because people change, Tom. We learned what it means to live as neighbors again." Rohan stood silently nearby, watching everyone with pride. The laughter, the warmth, the unity, it all felt right. As the sun began to set, he walked toward his boat one last time. He placed his hand gently on the railing and looked out over the calm lake. The water glimmered like glass, and a cool breeze brushed across his face. For the first time in a long while, there were no letters, no meetings, and no arguments. Only peace. He turned toward his house with a soft smile. The long journey was over, and Lake Meadow had found its heart again. And as night covered the quiet town, the silver patrol boat rested proudly in the driveway, a reminder of one man's quiet courage and the power of standing for what is right.